Namaskar, this is Akhilesh Bhargav. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. The Indian economy has been struggling and slowing down consistently since 2016, but seldom do we hear the finance minister or her advisors admit this reality. What we instead hear amidst doctor data are exaggerated and misleading claims of a buoyant, rising and reformed economy to say that all is well, which certainly is not. This has been best evident in the chief economic advisor's repeated claims of a V-shaped economic recovery in India, which we are yet to see. We do understand that the job of a neta is to sell hopes, even if it is by way of false claims as per today's political standards. But that should not be so in the case of government functionaries. It is necessary to project the real state of the Indian economy based on its material parameters to assess the true state and trajectory of the economy. And the material indicators and parameters that matter according to us when we talk of economic growth are jobs and employment, household consumption, and fresh investments taking place in the country or not. After all, an economy is all about the welfare and well-being of the individual and of the household in aggregate. It is because households spend and consume that there is an economy. And the more that households spend, the more is the economic growth of a nation. And India is no exception to this simple rule. Let us discuss some recent reports which mirror the actual state of the Indian households, whose gross spending constitutes about 55% of India's GDP and is thus the backbone of the Indian economy. The first report that we talk about today is about the rising inflation in India. The report says that retail inflation in India surged to a 3-month high of 4.9% during November 2021. It then points out that core inflation, which is overall inflation minus prices of food and fuel, core inflation, it says, is at about 12.08%. And this has actually fueled the overall rise in inflation in India. It then says that the cuts in excise duty and in prices of fuel have not provided much relief to retail inflation. Retail inflation continues to be elevated. The hike in telecom tariffs, supply chain disruptions, hike in GST rates on clothing and footwear, and the waning of the low base effect have added to this buildup of inflation that we are talking about. It then points out that inflation in commodities, inflation in health, fuel, power, transport and communication has become structural in India because of inadequate production, because of supply response being poor to an increase in demand. Thus, the supply side shortages today are aiding higher inflation, which does not look to be transitory. It shows structural weaknesses like supply bottlenecks and inadequate infrastructure, because of which inflation has been rising. Prices will therefore remain elevated in India till these structural weaknesses in the country and in the economy are not eased out. In the matter of inflation, the Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee in its latest outlook on the Indian economy says that costs push pressures from high industrial raw material prices because of transportation costs and global logistics, and because of supply chain bottlenecks continue to impinge on core inflation. The MPC says that the slack in the economy is muting the passing through of rising input costs of producers onto the prices to the end consumer. In other words, the producer is not truly able to pass on the increase in cost to the consumer. The RBI projects CPI inflation at 5.3% for the current financial year, thus implying that retail inflation will only go further from here. The inability of producers to fully pass on their rising costs to the consumers is also reflected in the rising wholesale price index, the WPI, which at 14.23% in November 2021 is at a 12-year high. Incidentally, WPI in November 2021 has risen to 14.23% from a mere 2.29% a year ago, and it continues to rise. WPI is considered to be a proxy figure for cost to the producers, and the huge gap between the WPI and the CPI means that the producer is unable to pass on the cost increases to the end consumer, showing that the consumer truly doesn't have the capacity to spend further. It is apparent that prices will go further, more so in case there is a surge in consumer demand in India, and that would compel the Reserve Bank of India to increase interest rates much earlier than when it may wish to do so. The next report from the CMIE is about rising unemployment in India. The CMIE points out that the struggling Indian economy has been unable to meet the rising demand for jobs. It says that the urban unemployment rate spiked to a double digit for the first time in 17 weeks, and it touched 10.09%. And that pushed the overall unemployment rate in India to 8.5%, which is also a high. The rural jobless rate too touched a 9-week high because of this, and it remains at 7.2% as of 12th December 2021. The high rate of unemployment reflects an increase in the demand for jobs and the economy's inability to create and provide jobs in adequate numbers, according to the CMI's analysis. The urban jobless rate has remained elevated in the past few weeks, and it will remain so. This slowdown in job creation and an increase in unemployment is confirmed by the Index of Industrial Production, the IIP, which fell to an 8-month low of merely 3.2% in October 2021. In doing so, the output of capital goods contracted by 1.1%. The output of consumer durables fell by 6.6%, and many other manufacturing subsectors recorded a negative growth in October 2021. And that should not be the case in case there has been a broad-based recovery taking place in the economy. The performance of several high-frequency indicators also deteriorated in November 2021, and those include electricity demand, GST e-way bills, port cargo traffic, etc., showing a continued deceleration in spending by the government and by the households. This fall in the IIP shows that the favorable impact of pent-up demand and of festival demand has petered out in the country, which casts a doubt to us on the very strength of the economic recovery taking place in India. A rising unemployment means a depletion in household income and savings. It also means a depletion in their confidence, which together with rising inflation means that they will spend less, and that is what the Mint reports. The Mint says that the rising prices of everything from computers to cooking oils, etc., are reshaping how Indians consume goods. The country's poor and middle-income households are opting for smaller packs and are postponing purchases of costly items such as electronics and of appliances. Mint says that nowhere is the trend more evident than in cooking oils, with the standard 1-liter bottles being edged out of the supermarket shelves by smaller, more affordable packs of 750 ml or 500 ml. If that is the condition of cooking oil, which is a basic necessity, then the plight of the non-essentials is of course much worse. It is for these reasons that the CMIE says that of all the fast frequency economic indicators, the recovery of consumer sentiment from the pandemic-induced economic shock has been the worst. It has been excruciatingly slow and uninspiring according to it. Though the consumer sentiment index was higher in November 2021 as compared to November 2020, it was however 43% lower than what it was during the pre-pandemic period of November 2019. It means that we are worse off today by 43% than what we were 2 years ago. The CMI therefore says that no other economic indicator has been as sluggish as this in its recovery, even though no other economic indicator is as important as the consumer sentiment index. And that is because it reflects the well-being of households, their growth in income, their expectation of future income streams, and their resulting propensity to spend beyond essentials, because of which we actually see broad-based recovery in any economy. It rightly points out that economic growth is required to deliver on this count of consumer welfare and consumer sentiment, and not just on high-frequency indicators like tax collections, e-way bills, freight movement or foreign trade. What truly matters is the growth in real income of households and spending by people when we talk about economy, when we talk about welfare, when we talk about prosperity of a nation. The larger picture to us is evident from the fact that in November 2021, 39% of Indian households reported that their income was lower than what it was a year ago, and 37% of households expected their income a year ahead, a year later, to be worse than their current income, and that certainly is worrisome. Only 6% of households believe that this was a better time to buy non-durables as compared to a year ago, and 50% believe that this was the worst time to do so, showing what an eroded consumer sentiment and confidence is in the country today. The most important question to be answered when we talk of the state of the economy is as to why are households spending less in an ongoing recovery year, and why are they spending less as compared to the immediate pre-pandemic year. The reasons for households not spending even in a recovery year are many, as the former finance minister Shri P. Chidambaram points out. And the reasons that he points out pertinently are either people are now poor in terms of per capita income, so they are not spending, or they have lower incomes, so they can't spend, or they have lost their jobs, or they have closed down their business, or they have now less disposable income to spend, or people are deterred by the high prices, or that they are saving more. To us, the answer lies in a bit of all of these factors. This reluctance of households to spend is the biggest challenge to India's recovery. The weak consumer sentiment and unwillingness of the households to spend and of the corporates to invest only mean that it is the government that has to do the heavy lifting for the revival of the economy, which it has not done so far. It keeps coming back to the fact that the government has not put in enough fiscal support to revive the economy. Until that is not done, we are not going to see investments taking off. We are not going to see consumers willing to spend. And that's because their jobs and their livelihoods have gone and they remain in danger. This is Akhilesh Bhargav signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.